Hello everyone. Internal audit reports. They are more than just documents. They are strategic tools that help organizations strengthen their controls, manage risks, and create real value. But let's face it, writing a clear, impactful internal audit report isn't always easy. Whether you are just starting out in the world of internal auditing or you are looking to refine your reporting skills, understand what makes a report truly effective is very essential. In this video, we are going to go beyond theory. I will walk you through a real world sample of an internal audit report, and we will break down each section and show you what works, why it matters, and how to elevate your own report writing. So, if you are ready to bridge the gap between audit work and actionable insight, let's get started. So, this is one real life example of an internal audit report. This is the first page.
So the objective of presenting this internal audit report is to show you what are the contents that are mandatory in an internal audit report and how it should look like to make it more presentable and appealing to the user. It is important that you drive the user's attention to the report and ensure all critical information is captured for the readers of the report. So let's get started. So this is the first page that you're seeing where you have the company information, you have the division for which you're presenting the report, and the period of the report. That is, the audit report covers the instances or the exceptions for the period April to June 24. April to June 24 is your review period. That is, all the data pertains to this period for which you are reporting.
Okay, and kindly note that this particular structure of the report is not a standard. It could be a PowerPoint presentation, it could be in some other form, but the contents of the report are very important. So I want you to focus on the content and how it is presented within the report. This is the second page where we give a table of contents. Now, if you notice, all the sections which are covered in the report are properly organized. The page numbers are given, and this is a system generated content table. So the links actually work. If I click on distribution list, it takes me to distribution list. Okay, to do that, you will have to create this particular section heading as a header by selecting the right format when you are creating it in a Word document or a PowerPoint or whatever, right? So you should present the content properly so that the person who is reading the report can easily navigate through the report. Let us go to the next section. So this is the distribution list. It is very important to address the right people who are readers of the report. So you should clearly mention whom the report is addressed to, and then who are all the other people to whom the report has been marked for their information or for their decision making.
So these readers are generally the process owners or who are accountable for this report. The CFO would somewhere be accountable for the financial implications. The plant president would and the material head would be accountable for the related processes. So you cannot mark this report to anybody and everybody. So it is very important to know who are the readers to all these reports. The process owner is the first person who has to read the report and whose reply is incorporated in the report. So he should definitely be marked here. Then you also see that on the face of this page that there is a header and a footer. You have to make sure that on each page there is a reference to the audit that you are doing, like the manufacturing division of ABC Limited.
So this is the header portion, which is repeated on all the pages. If you see, it is repeated on all the pages, the same. And then there is this footer section, okay, which is also repeated on all the pages. So that has to be properly defined. In footer, you usually write the report reference number and that it is privileged and confidential. And you put the page number references, which is auto-generated. And in the header, you mention the company name and the division or the department or function which has been audited. So the reader is very clear. There is never a confusion as to, what is the context of this report, which department it belongs to and all. Okay, so this was section 1, which is a distribution list. The next section is the reporting time statistics or timelines. So here we have given the reference of the report number. So this is the reference number which can be used for future references. If somebody wants to come back and point towards an audit observation relating to a past report, they can always use this as a reference number. Then you describe the period for which the audit was conducted. You mentioned the commencement date. When was the audit commenced? When was the field work completed? When were the draft reports submitted to the head of departments for their responses? Then when were the final responses received from the department or management? And when was the final report issued? So these very clearly mention when what has happened.
So this here, if you see in the reporting statistics, it also defines the TAT of the internal auditor and the management. So from the date of commencement to the date of submission of the draft report is the TAT of the internal auditor. And from here, references are made with respect to the efficiency of the internal audit department. That how much time did the internal audit department take to complete the field work? Was that time justified based on the observations that are published? Okay, and then you have the management reply, which is equally critical for the management to know that when the HOD responded to the observations. If the report is submitted on 30th June, did he reply within 7 days or 10 days? Did he take a long period of time, say 30 days to reply? So these are all questionable by the management and the board if they are involved in reading the report.
Let us look at the next section now. So this section covers what all is covered in an audit and what is the frequency of coverage. Now in this report, we are not going to discuss all the departments, but I've just given you this part so that you can understand that this also gives management a context that which all department are reviewed how frequently and how is the reporting done for them. So in this particular report, we will discuss the materials management part, which is audited on a quarterly basis. Then there is section 4, which talks about the scope of work. This is again very important. Without understanding what was the scope of review, if you start reading the report, it will not provide you the right context. So the reader of the report has to know that what was the auditor going to review, what was the scope, how was it defined. Now we have given it here in a form of a list. It can also be presented in a tabular form where you can divide these listed items into subsections, and then for each subsection you mention what are the areas. For example, master records is one section where you have reviewed the completeness of master data, and then you have also reviewed who created the master data, what is the control over creation or editing of master data, and so on.
So the scope has to be very concise. It cannot be like a 2-pager document. You have to present it in 1 page what the scope of review was.
Right. So in this section, you present what all has been audited by the auditor in terms of the extent of the review. So this basically presents statistics of the transactions, the number of transactions which were there in population, the extent to which the checking was done. So let us take an example here. The transaction here we are talking about is analysis of stock control spares. So stock control spares total, there were 2012, and the amount that was involved was 74.10 million, out of which the entire population was taken up for analysis because it was an analysis and it was done in a spreadsheet. That is why the entire population was done and the coverage was 100%. But if you see the next line item, analysis of chemicals and catalysts, there the population is 84, which amounts to 1034 million. Only 16 items were reviewed. However, those 16 items in terms of value are equal to 998 million, which is 97% of the total value. In terms of numbers, the coverage is less. So the auditor can always justify why this kind of sampling was done.
So this is the population versus the sample. Okay? And now this coverage also gives an indication to the management on the intensity of the observation that will be presented down.
Correct.
So it is not always necessary for an auditor to do 100% coverage, specifically when they have to do documentation review. Okay, a 19% coverage versus the deviation that is being reported. This is what the reader of the report would like to see, or what is the intensity of the high risk or the medium risk reported versus the coverage, the percentage of coverage. So whether the coverage needs to be extended by the auditor, or the coverage is sufficient to say that the control is in place or is not in place. That is what is read to this coverage percentage.
And then you can always justify your sampling methods. What exactly have you done here? So like for example, in this case, the auditor has mentioned that for key processes, transactions, are reviewed on a sample basis, covering approximately 70% of the total value. Here they've covered more than 70% in all the cases, but at least 70% will be covered. Samples were selected to cover both high value transactions and few low value transactions as well, and also to cover various types of transactions. So for this purpose, they have stratified the sampling. Stratified in the sense they have created various small groups, each kind of transaction, each month of transaction, all those have been grouped, and then from them samples are drawn so that the sampling is representative of the entire population that is being audited. And they've mentioned the key exceptions which are identified are highlighted in the following section. So this was all about the context. Okay, from the next section, we'll start looking at the observations. So first part is executive summary. Now this is very important. When you're presenting the audit report to the top level management, the board of directors or audit committee, there has to be an executive summary. You don't expect them to read 30, 40 pages of a report or even larger than that. So you present them 2 or 3 pager executive summary, which will summarize the most critical points within the audit report and what you feel is most important for them to know. What is key in your understanding or your judgment that you want the management to take notice of.
So now all these high, medium, low, these risks are derived from the grading matrix, risk grading matrix. So if it is not defined, then it is to the judgment of the auditor to categorize an observation as a high, medium, low. Otherwise, it comes purely from the risk grading matrix that is defined and approved by the management.
Yes. So that is your criteria to be utilized here when you are defining what is a risk category or a risk impact for a particular observation. And then you summarize. There could be various forms of summary. This is a very simple form where you are listing down the observation number and you are mentioning what is the observation in brief. When we go to this actual observation, which is 7.1, you will notice that this is a very detailed observation. However, it has just been summarized in these 4 lines. Okay, what is critical for the management? Like there were 553 items of stock control items, which were more than the maximum level defined. And the excess amount was equivalent to 12.5 million, which is leading to blockage of funds. So this should come to management's attention. And also we are presenting what is the response of the process owners or the management, where material procured was for shutdown, it was not consumed, items have been identified and they have been flagged for stopping the procurement process. So this is also very critical that action is also presented along with the observation and the people who are responsible to take the action.
And so when the management reads the executive summary, they want to know everything in a concise form. So they want to know what is the audit observation, why did that observation happen, or what is the root cause of that observation, and what is the risk. All these three have to be concise in one paragraph. Okay, and along with that, they would also want to know what is the reply of the process owner who is responsible for implementing that recommendation against the observation given. So all this has to be presented in one statement or in 2 paragraphs for the management to understand.
Very brief, something that can be discussed with them in a matter of 5 minutes. Okay, so this just the part just extends wherever you want some detailing is required, you can give a small table like this, but again it is in a summarized form, nothing much detailed. Okay, so this is the executive summary, which is comprised of 3.5 pages. Then the detailed audit report starts, and then you give it a section number. Now I want you to notice the numbering portion here. Okay, suppose this portion is for materials management, okay, which is section number 7. All the audit observations are then numbered as 7.1, 7.2. So proper referencing is important. Okay, now let us notice each portion of the audit observation part. The first one is the heading section or the title of the audit observation. Now how do you write this? You can write this the way headlines are written for newspaper reports or newspaper articles, where the headline tells you what are you expecting inside that report. So in this, the observation title should be such that makes it very clear what the reader is going to expect in the audit observation. Here we are seeing there is excess stock worth 12.5 million of stock control items and packing material as compared to the maximum level. So the user knows, okay, this is all about the excess material which was found as compared to the maximum level which was defined. Okay, now the observation is detailed. It is titled that this is the observation portion, and all the statistics, all the numbers which are supporting that observation are mentioned within the report. Okay, if you notice something, along with the figure, We are also mentioning what percentage of total is it representing. So this again gives a context. It makes sure that the management pays attention only to those things which are important. Suppose this was only 1.7% of total. Would that be critical then, or would it be material? It would not be. So this gives a context. Since 12.5 is 17% of the total stock, it is very important for the management to take notice. Then wherever there are details that you want to present in form of a table, you can always give a neat and clean table, nicely organized, which has to be formatted properly, like the one that you see here. Okay, the heading has to be separately highlighted in some color, ideally gray or some color if colors are permitted in the reporting theme. And it has to be properly numbered. Now, if you see, the numbering of this particular table is drawn from the observation itself. So observation is 7.1 and this table number is 7.1.1. So if independently somebody is referring to this table, they would automatically understand this table belongs to observation number 7.1.
So if you see the table also, you cannot have a table which runs into 2 pages. Here you have to put the major instances. So maximum up to 10 line items. If you make it too long, it is very difficult to read. It has to go as a part of your annexure. Here you are only trying to give a perspective to the audit observation, highlighting the major instances. If the user wants to look at all the instances, they can refer the exhibit.
Right.
Now, if you see on the first page, on the top of the page also, you see that the observation is highlighted. Now again, this is to make it appealing to the user to read it, that this is the headline and that is the audit headline, and then you have the observation which is separate. So it just catches their attention as to what the observation is going to talk about.
Right.
Yeah, then you see the alignment of the numbers also. You see all are right aligned, numbers are right aligned. So again, this consistency has to be maintained. If you take it in the middle, then you will not have the right alignment.
Yes,
And the numbers will look.
center aligned numbers are not comparable. So here you can easily understand that this number is larger than this one. Okay, the first one is larger than the second one. The third one is the largest. It can only be understood properly when the numbers are right aligned and there are proper commas given for thousands, millions, and billions.
Try to avoid decimals because the decimals don't really look appealing in the table.
And they do not matter. The materiality is not of importance there. That is why I should not be giving decimals unless you are giving figures which are in millions. Okay, and then decimals are given, then that would make sense. But since here the numbers are absolute, there is no need. One more important thing that you can notice here is the source of information is mentioned here. This is again very important. Somebody, if they want to cross validate or verify whether the information is correct, they can always go to the source information and verify that whatever is presented in the report is correct. This can also help the person who is reviewing your report, your senior or your supervisor. They can again use this reference and they can check whether the figures have been correctly posted here. And since as you noticed earlier that we have not presented all the points, all the numbers here, there are total 553 items. If I give a table containing 553 items here, it will just take tens of pages worth of space. You only do a small number which is major items, and then rest of it can be presented as an annexure. Like in this case, the auditor has given a file which is attached within the document. However, if this is not possible for you, then you can always give it as an annexure, which will be separately attached to the audit report. However, it will not capture the core space of the audit. Now,
Yeah. And the consistency also has to be maintained of the figures that are reported. Like INR, you're using INR. Okay, if you're using a rupee symbol, then it has to be rupee across the board. If you're using million, then everywhere the amount should be presented in million only. You can't have million at one place, crore at another place, thousands at another place. So the consistency of the numbers and the unit has to be maintained across the report.
if you notice one more thing, the spacing that we have used between the lines is 1.25. And why this spacing? It becomes easy for the reader to read the lines. If these lines were cramped together, okay, with only single spacing, it would be very difficult for the user to read it. So the audit report has to be easy to be referred to. It cannot be very cluttered, and it has to be properly organized. Same example, we will not discuss this any further, but this is how information is presented. Only major instances here, and then the details are given in annexure. Now that was the observation section. Okay, the next section is the risk impact of the same observation. Now here the risk rating is mentioned as high, which is colored. Okay, so that again it draws the attention of the user, and the risks are properly bulleted and given as bullet points. They are not given as a paragraph. It becomes easy to break it down and to absorb by the user. So there are three risk factors that we are listing here. Risk should be always looked at from the impact perspective. So here we have mentioned it is leading to blockage of funds. And then in the second part, open requisitions, again, it leads to excess stock and blockage of funds. And then again in third part, we are saying it can again lead to excess items which are not marked as surplus, and then it can lead to excess procurement. So the impact of the risk has to really come out in the sentence that you have mentioned, the bullet point that you have mentioned in the risk impact.
So the bullets can be numbered also, it can be symbol bullets also. Avoid repetition to the extent possible unless it is absolutely essential. So the risk impact has to be given in a bulleted and in as well as in a concise form.
Same with the recommendations. Just ensure that your recommendations is matching with what is mentioned in the risk impact and what is mentioned in the observation. If it is misaligned, then it will create a wrong impression. So for example, here we are talking about alternate usage plan. Why alternate usage plan? Because the material is excess. It is not being utilized and there has to be some alternate usage. That is what is being recommended. So it is aligned to what we have already reported in the risk impact and observation. Again, it has to be very concise and given in bullet forms, not
So
in
the
form.
recommendation should be said that it covers the corrective as well as the preventive action that is required to be taken by the user.
Yes. Now this is the auditee response section. If you see the root cause is mentioned here, generally you will see that auditors cover the root cause section somewhere before the risk impact section. That is immediately after the observation is reported, the root cause is also reported. In this particular case, based on the requirement of the company, the audit report format was designed in this way that the root cause analysis, the corrective and preventive action has to be given by the auditee, the person who is being audited, the process owner or the head of department. So in that case, this is given here, but this has to be validated by the auditor and it has to be matching with what is being reported. So the management has given a root cause that the material was procured for shutdown and then it was not consumed, and that is why we have excess stock levels, which is a way of justifying whatever the observation is. However, they are also acknowledging it and giving a corrective action and a preventive action. It need not be necessary that there is always a corrective and preventive action. It could be either corrective or preventive or both, depending on the situation. But as an auditor, you have to ensure that the observation and the recommendations have been adequately addressed. And again, these actions are also aligned to the root cause as well as to the recommendations which were made. It cannot be something else.
So if the recommendation and the corrective and preventive action do not match, you need to go back to the auditee and ensure that they are aligned. Because when you're presenting the executive summary, you can't say something and the auditee saying something else. So this is very important part of the audit report, that even if you are showing a deviation or an exception, it has to be acknowledged and a corrective action has to be given by the auditee. And this both of these things can be aligned only when the root cause is properly defined and is known or is ascertained, so that the recommendation and the corrective and preventive action can be aligned based on the root cause to solve the root cause of the issue.
And ensure that whatever response is given by the auditee, the language is correct. For example, they are clearly mentioning that majority of these consumables will be consumed. So they are talking about will be, what action will be taken by them in terms of overcoming the current problem. And in future, what they are going to do, they are saying new system of shutdown is already implemented. Okay, so some action is already taken that they have mentioned here. Plus, they are saying we will take up some more action with the purchase department and the vendor to ensure that the material can be bought back. So there is some buyback scheme available to mitigate future. So preventive is future related, corrective is to solve the current problem at hand. So ensure that the languages are also correct. If they are not, you have to go back to the auditee and get them corrected. Lastly, if there is an action, there has to be a target date. In this case, it is already implemented, so the auditee has mentioned it as implemented. Otherwise, it would be a date. And if there are multiple actions, there could be multiple dates against each action. Similarly, the responsibility matrix should be clearly defined, that who is person who is primarily responsible, somebody who is accountable or is on the monitoring responsibility, So those names should be clearly defined here along with the designation. So this is one breakup of an observation. Now there are a lot of observations. We'll try and look at what are very other unique things that you can find in the other observations. So this second one is pretty similar. There is something new in the next observation which we will look at, which is 7.3. So if you see in 7.3, we have this additional section which is called a standard or a criteria or a background. So it could be either a standard. For example, the company has created a policy, okay, which is or a standard process that this is how things have to be done, and your audit is in context of that standard, and your observation is saying that the standard was not followed, okay. Or it could be a criteria, for example, some criteria or policy defined by the management that it has to be like this, and then you are auditing against that and then presenting your observation. Or it could be a background where you are explaining the current set of processes. You are basically telling the reader of the report that this is how things usually happen, and when we conducted the audit we found so and so observations or so and so issues. Okay, so this is basically setting of a context. Rest of the portion is pretty much similar. You will notice that the report is very well formatted and organized. It is to be ensured that the reader of the report should find it very easy to read the report. Okay, one more point to notice here, that whenever there are common references, you can always merge them. Like in this case, under a single material document, there were so many transactions. So this particular set of cells have been merged and only a single number has been written instead of repeating them, which would create confusion for the user. Whether these are different transactions or is it a single transaction. So here you can clearly make out that this is the first transaction, this is second, this is the third transaction, and this is how it is being repeated. Okay, in case during writing of the report you feel that this table is getting extended to the next page, okay, you should try and avoid that. But if you cannot avoid that, just ensure that this particular header of the report is repeated in the next portion of the table. So I'll give you one example here. We will look at one case where we have that thing. Yeah, in this case. So if you see this particular table 7.6.2, okay, the table starts here. After these line items, there are additional 3 line items. So we have repeated the header so that the user, when he is looking at the next page, should not get confused as to what is the heading of these figures. Okay, so these are small things, but they make the report really beautiful. It is easy to read, it is easy to consume, and the auditor is always appreciated for this kind of work.
So now here, if you see the word medium, it is written in the same color as we had highlighted in the executive summary. So the consistency of the colors also have to be maintained. The format has to be the same. If you're mentioning the responsibility and the monitoring authority, so you have to ensure that it is there as a part of every response, that there is a responsibility and the monitoring person. If there is no monitoring person assigned for that responsibility, you can leave it blank, but you still need to have that as a header. The see, now in this case you don't find any root cause mentioned, okay, but you still maintain this, that the cause is not mentioned, but you cannot eliminate this step.
So it is highlighted here clearly that there is no root cause given. There could be a situation where there are no root causes, however there is an exception. So table can be given in a summarized form where there is no referencing required, because then that forms part of the observation. When there is a detailed table given, you can always give it a numbering like this. Here if you see there are multiple plants, and to differentiate between those plants for ease of the user, there are color codings given so that the user can easily distinguish between different plants and the products related to them. Similarly, since this observation is addressing multiple plants, if you see in the audit response, the responses have also been segregated between plants. So root cause has been segregated. Similarly, the corrective and preventive action have also been segregated. Now, how this helps is the user can easily identify what are the actions relating to which plant, or what are the points relating to which plant, and there is no confusion as to what is required to be done. Same with the target dates and the responsibility matrix as well. So this was the overall presentation on a sample audit report. We thought this was very much necessary because a lot of internal auditors nowadays struggle in terms of creating a good quality internal audit report. We thought instead of just explaining how it is to be done, we would show an example so that it helps our viewers. So hope you enjoyed this, and wish you all the best in your career. Thank you.